G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Brett Steele from Spirit Thief, based here in Hobart, Tasmania. Thanks for your time today, Brett.
Thank you, Troy.
Let's scratch our brains here. Let's start with how we know each other. I'm just trying to do the numbers before. Was it 8 years ago when I was at Lark we first met?
I think it was. I remember you'd just become CEO at Lark Distillery when I was just beginning out with Tasmanian Whisky Tours. Mm-hmm. And we were introduced and have sort of grown on that journey from there.
Yeah, so much so a bit over a year ago now, yourself, Ian and I launched the Distillers Institute online course for those looking at starting a distillery in Australia or New Zealand. And we've got a bit over 200 students now.
Yeah, that's right. So being business partners with you has been a tremendous ride so far.
Thanks. I think I'll read that as a positive. Yeah.
It is. We did mentoring. You had a mentoring capacity in my businesses, and was always a good person to run some ideas by until we joined forces.
Yeah, great. Well, tell our audience a bit about Spirit Thief, what it does and how it makes money.
Sure. Spirit Thief started out as a independent bottler for Tasmanian single malt whiskey. We ventured a little further afield to New Zealand and Scotland in terms of sourcing casks to resell back to the Australian domestic market. And now we produce our own whiskey and have been doing so for the last 2.5 years now, about 20 minutes south of Hobart in a distillery here in Huntingfield.
Maybe for the audience, just explain what an independent bottler is.
Sure. Independent bottler is really an opportunity to work with other distilleries, either through their existing stocks, repurchasing those and positioning for the market, or the way we went about it was to source our own casks, something a little bit different from the wine industry where I'm originally from, and take my knowledge and wanting to collaborate with other distilleries about using their spirit that was custom made for our casks and becoming a unique product that we could put out to sale.
And how did you start out?
I began my sort of career as a journalist originally back in South Australia. Did a journalism degree, went across to the UK and London. Really fell in love with Scottish single malt whiskies over there, having come from a wine background. And to me, I then moved into marketing when I returned to Australia. So I worked for the Sydney Opera House for a couple of years there before moving to Tasmania, which was now about 10 years ago.
And sorry, just on that, by moving to Tasmania, don't you mean that you missed your flight back to Sydney and said, fuck it, I'm just going to stay?
That's true, actually. I left Sydney after 2 years, having stayed on there. And, the thought was to return to Melbourne. I'd done 5 years in Melbourne. That place always felt like home to me, whereas Sydney, I felt a little in a foreign land. But via Samoa, I made my way back here to Tasmania and settled, late 2011, early 2012.
Great. Yeah. And so your first business you started out was Drink Tasmania down here?
It was. It wasn't my original intention. My first thought was to move to Hobart and to start a small wine and spirits bar with the success that we'd seen in Melbourne and Sydney with the small bar movement. Hadn't really taken off here in Hobart at the time. Mona was just getting underway, and there was a lot of excitement about what the next 10 years would look like for the state.
I mean, look at Baxter's Inn in Sydney. It's been voted one of the top 10 bars in Melbourne. It's wholly a whiskey bar, but it's of all the bars in the world, not just whiskey bars, that's been in the top, voted in the top 10.
That's right. And I left Sydney right about the time that Baxter's was just opening its doors.
Mm.
So looking around down here in Hobart to do a similar thing, we actually had investors from Melbourne come down, and we looked at a number of venues. But winters were different. It was a different time here in Hobart. Dark Mofo hadn't started up yet. There was a lot of limitations on tourists coming through, and the bar culture hadn't really progressed to obviously where it is now. So as part of that research, I just assumed that you could go and visit the distilleries around Tasmania in the same way that we'd visited wineries growing up near McLaren Vale in SA, but pretty quickly found out that they weren't really open to the public en masse. There was no real set way to get around from one to the other. And if you could get in, it was sort of industry by appointment only. And so that was where the idea to pivot away from running a small bar into actually running a tourism venture was sort of born.
And what was that? What year did you launch Drinks Tasmania Tours?
It was late 2013 that we went and did the first research tour. There were a few new ones opening up, and it became obvious that there was a viable route that could be done as a one-day tourism experience. And so the first tour itself was the 9th of January 2014, starting out at Lark Cellar Door, where, as we discussed, you were CEO at the time.
Mm. And so fast forward then, Drink Tasmania, you sold that a bit over a year ago now?
Yeah, that's right. So the company began as Tasmanian Whisky Tours, specifically focused on distilleries. We grew it. The second sort of industry we added to it was cider 12 months later. Then state growth, the government down here asked us to look into setting up beer tours as well, because that industry was growing and had a lot of interest around craft breweries. And then wine, which was my background and things I'd never anticipated running wine tours, but it just made sense. And so we amalgamated those into Drink Tasmania. That ran for 6 years. Well, I held it for 6 years. And then December 2019, on-sold the business to another couple of local guys here in Hobart that have taken it really from strength to strength.
Just before COVID hit. That was good timing for you.
Just before COVID. It was on the market there for nearly 12 months. I think we put it on the market in February 2019. And that was in order for me to pursue Spirit Thief, Distilling Co. But finding the right person to sell it to and, having your baby move into new hands took a little while. So, we were fortunate that, got out before COVID. And John and Pete that have taken it on are doing exceptionally well, having brought it through the COVID period so far.
And what year did you start Spirit Thief?
The Spirit Thief began in 2015, and really it was a passion project between myself and two others in the industry, Jared and Ian, who were bartenders at the time. And really we expected it only to be a small scenario, small release that we would do for friends and family and industry that were interested. And the results of our pilot casks, just to give a bit of context, we wanted to see how Tasmanian Spirit would mature in varietal specific red wine casks. So as our unique selling point, we wanted to look at French oak Tempranillo casks and American oak Shiraz, toasting and charring those, a lot of learnings from the wine industry and what we could bring into, the evolution of what was happening here with spirits at the time, and see if we could do something a little bit different.
Right. And then there was a change in investors along the way?
Yeah, there was. So we matured those first pilot casks for nearly 3 years. It only resulted in a couple of hundred bottles, which we went to market with, and they were snapped up pretty quickly. But off the back of that, we had a brand, we had an established market position, unique selling point, and investors then came on board, and we were able to get capital investment to grow and really turn it into a serious business. So that happened in late 2018.
Yep. So Jared and Ian cashed out. You decided to stay on and help grow the business even further with the 3 new investors.
Yeah, that's right. We had a number of ways of looking at it. Jared, Ian, and myself could have continued doing it as a passion project, part time on the side, but we saw that there was an opportunity to, really grow this into a fully fledged business, spirits business. So I took on the opportunity to sell off Drink Tasmania as the tourism side of things. Ian and Jared cashed in on theirs, and we had 3 new directors come in who are based in Melbourne, and the 4 of us now run the company.
Great. And do you have some key numbers that illustrate the growth of the business over the last 6 years?
Yeah, so Drink Tasmania, Tasmanian Whisky Tours, in our first 3 years, we were really 100% growth year on year. As that changed, we sort of added more products and more tourism experiences onto it. So after the first 12 months, we realized that growth had to come through other avenues besides spirits. And so cider was the one that we decided to back in against there, as was the government at the time. And really, I sort of compare that to having a racehorse. You can train it up in advance, but you never know how it's going to go until you actually put it out on the course and see how it runs. So cider tours didn't eventuate for us, but what did come about was what we call our signature tour, our mixed range, where you could experience beer, wine, cider, and whiskey in one day and have a little bit of an overview of everything. And that became really popular, and that is what doubled growth in 12 months for us.
Great, yeah. Anything else on DT or growth numbers for Spirit Thief?
Well, what I think I can say about DT is we reached a point by late 2016 where I had to make a decision which was personal as well as in the interests of the business. I was sort of working weekends, had the staff behind that there, but was about to become a father at the same time, and so had to make some changes to no longer be working in the business, but to be working on the business. And in some ways, that meant scaling back the amount of tours that we actually offered for a short period of time, and concentrate on managing the business at a scale that we could handle for the family situation and for the staff that I had. So growth was, I wouldn't say stunted, but it was held back to a certain point for a couple of years there, so I could concentrate on work-life balance with the family and the kids there too.
Good, yeah. And what was kind of the FTE on Drinks Tasmania from the start to when you sold it? How many full-time equivalents would you say?
Yeah. So when I began in early 2014, really I was part-time myself. I had another role in the wine industry here with Marilla over winter. So I'd say it was 1 FTE at the end of the first year that quickly moved into 2. I took on another director, and we went 2 FTE, and then very quickly added another 4 to 5 casual staff members there. So probably 5 FTE after 3 years.
Yep.
And we held it there for the next 3 years, with the potential to grow beyond when we position the company to sell.
Yep, great. What about on Spirit Thief, FTE or and what litres under maturing or bottles? Any numbers there?
Yeah, sure. Similar kind of thing in some ways. There was 3 of us that were part-time directors that were a passion project just for this first couple of years, whilst The product was maturing. We've now got the 4 directors on board, 2 FTE, and about to go to 4 FTE at the start of the next financial year.
You're putting on a sales manager in Melbourne, aren't you?
We are, yeah. We're putting on a national sales and marketing representative to start in June, which is exciting for us. And we've got about 30,000 litres maturing in the bond stores.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
So, yeah, we're currently laying down about 1,000 litres a month, and continue to do that. The great thing about our setup, I guess, with Gypsy Distilling or contract distilling, we don't actually own our own distillery, but I am on the ground here brewing and distilling once a week, every Monday, and managing that with the team through contract distillation. So if we choose to double or triple production in the coming months or in 12 months' time, we can do that. If we have another COVID event, then we can scale that back there as well. So it was a deliberate choice not to build a distillery up front, but to use the facilities that were really quite new to the industry in 2019, late 2019, that was a new direction for Tasmanian single malt whiskey.
Yeah. And early years of Spirit Thief, how many litres a year you're doing about 12,000 litres now that you're producing. How many in those first year or two with the 3 of you working on it? How many litres were you kind of pumping out or putting into cask?
Well, when Jared, Ian and I began in 2015, we literally only had 120 litres down for the first 18 months.
Yep.
Which, is really just pilot casks, testing whether maturation style would even work. Off the sales of those bottles, we stepped it up to probably about 700, 800 litres there in oak. And then the new directors came on, and as we mentioned, we're now doing 1,000 litres a month. In our first year, we did close to 15,000 litres. Some down. We stepped back a little bit last year during COVID, and ended up with about 8,000 litres last year. But now we're back on track, 12,000 litres a year, which will eventuate to, sort of 20 to 25,000 bottles for us by about 2024, 2025.
Well, that's great testament, I think, that you were able to sell to new investors come into the business when, one, you had little stock under management at the time, very few sales. I think you said a few hundred bottles, but you obviously had a strong brand and proven a position in the market. That's very impressive.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it was one of those foundations that we wanted to stay true to. Very easy when you're an independent bottler and you've only got a few hundred bottles, but to have investors that believe in that strategy and that unique selling point for the volumes we're talking about into the future is a fantastic privilege to be able to work like that.
When was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Troy, I barely feel like we've even gotten started on this business yet. We're about to come into our own core releases of whiskey late June, early July, which is the stuff that I've been involved in actually producing and making ourselves, which will become our core SKUs into the future. I feel like I'm taxiing to the runway. We haven't even taken off yet.
Yep. All right. Well, what does success look like to you?
Success for me now, I think, is really about getting this right work lifestyle balance with this business in a way that we can grow it in a sustainable direction towards those numbers. So if we're selling 25,000 bottles a year by 2025, some of that no doubt will be export as well as covering domestically. But building a brand that we're proud we can stand behind, that we haven't shifted from our foundations around ex-red wine specific maturations. If we can hold true to that and be in export markets that allow us to reach foreign shores, then that'll feel like a great day to be sitting in a bar overseas somewhere and order a bottle of Spirit Thief.
Good. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Yeah, look, marketing for me, in the ways I've experienced it since being at the Sydney Opera House and running my own businesses now here for a little while, I feel like knowing your numbers and really understanding that marketing is a return on investment is key to growing that business quickly. So knowing what works and how to repeat it, and in some ways having a machine where we can put that money into marketing and see a result out the other end, as well as building a brand. They're the two things that I would say would equate to fast growth.
Yep. And how did you fund the business, Spirit Thief?
Well, initially it was self-funded between the three of us in 2015 on, half a shoestring budget is what I really say. I'm more than happy to share that it probably cost us about $20,000 to do the first release of a couple of hundred bottles, and that included the spirit and the barrels and market. So we did it on smell of an oily rag, and now we're at a place where we can get capital investment in excess of $1 million to go forward from here, and that came from the new directors basically buying out two of the other shareholders and then fronting the capital for this. So we're not in any debt capital in terms of loans, but it's personal capital for the growth.
It's an interesting story, isn't it? How you found your current co-investors.
Yeah, it is, and coincidence is one way of looking at it, but essentially it was a combination of these. I guess my multiple businesses coming together. So one or two of the directors that are now involved came on a 3-day whiskey tour trip when I was running Drink Tasmania Premium Tours, and we took them around to distilleries for 3 days, really as a leisure scenario, and they were on board as guests. And I got a call maybe 6 months later from one of them saying that they were keen to come back to Tasmania, look at it from a business perspective in a way that they hadn't done it the first time, visit new places, and consider whether they start a distillery of their own over in Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, or whether there was room in Tasmania to operate there as well. So they came back and we ran a private tour with a business perspective in mind for them, looking at a couple of sites and talking to people in the industry. And what emerged over those 3 days was, of course, discussion around what we were doing with Spirit Thief, which at the time, had only been out in the market for a short period of time, but had pretty much sold out. And so we'd established a brand, had that product there, but no way to really grow the business forward. And so it was put to me almost by them as to whether there was a room or a place there to collaborate and go forward. And so over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, that opportunity arose.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, I think I would. For me, it kind of feels like all my past nearly 40 years experience have sort of driven in this direction, deliberately or not deliberately. I'm not 100% sure, but my grandfather worked for Hardy's Winery in South Australia for about 40 odd years, was a director there for a couple of decades. So that was all I knew growing up, was really around the wine family. After finishing my journalism degree, I headed up to the Riverland, was a cellar hand up there making the wines. So going through journalism and marketing and then tourism side of things, it all sort of now amalgamates into what Spirit Thief has become. So I feel very privileged and very excited about the next decade or so ahead for the company. So yeah, absolutely, I would.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Certainly within the tourism side of things, when I had Drink Tasmania, managing staff very quickly, watching the growth around how to manage them, their expectations, what we required of them in a casual basis, because we never knew exactly what tours were going to go ahead until the week beforehand. And learning to respect that each staff member has different priorities and different needs and different ways of leading and managing their role. I think that was a really great learning lesson for me. And stress, of course, was then cash flow. So having started out as one person, quick growth in terms of adding tours and adding products to it meant that cash flow became a lot higher and a lot more volatile as to the sustainability of the business there as well. So we took an overdraft at one stage. Coming into the sale of the company, I really needed to step out and prove that it could be self-sustaining and managed as someone working on the business rather than working in it. And so that 12 months in 2018 was quite stressful, but taught me a lot about how to exit a business as well.
Yeah, great. And what area in business you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I think for me, really learning to trust my instincts and trust my decision making has come a long way in that 6 to 7 years. It's one thing to have control, to be the decision maker. It's another thing to trust that those decisions that you're making are the right ones, and to change direction quickly if they're not. So the fail fast rule, and I think I'm getting better at that as the years go on.
What have you enjoyed least about managing fast growth?
I think the stress really around cash flow was something that I hadn't experienced before. When you're working for other people, such at the Sydney Opera House, we had huge budgets to sell and put on productions and have $100,000 marketing budgets there. But learning very quickly with fast growth that every dollar is a real dollar that's in the account and disappears and needs to be coming back in, isn't as theoretical as it is working for larger organizations. So that was tricky, but one that's made me a much better business manager and I think CEO for this company now.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love that every day is honestly very different. This is a small business that is only just getting underway now. So for me around Spirit Thief, it was important that I took an internship and learnt how to be a brewer, how to be a distiller, being on the floor for 2 years, making our own spirit there. Understanding that meant that I would then understand in a much better way how to sell it, how to market it, what's required in terms of building a brand. So the authenticity, I think, has been a really enjoyable part of this whole process. But the necessity of having to do everything myself in this early stage has been enjoyable. And now I'm looking forward to bringing on other team members that are much more skilled and experienced in other areas than what I have been.
What's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
The biggest mindset is that, that is a little bit of a tricky one, but I would say that in my early days, I used to be, I think, nervous isn't the right word, but conscious of wanting to hire and employ people that experience would fit my own experiences in the business and we could work together. And I think the mind shift that's happened over this last 5 or 6 years is that we can hire people that are much more experienced than I am, and getting the strength and advice and their own experiences into the team takes the business a lot further than what I was doing previously in the way that I was handling and bringing on staff. So now, in the way that we're looking for national and sales and marketing manager, I'm not so nervous about bringing on someone with many more years experience than what I've had, and using their strengths to take the business to its full potential.
What's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Discipline, I think, is a really important one that I'm still working on every day. It's challenging to have discipline around the way in which you work in your business that is sustainable longer term. So Monday to Friday is now the working pattern that I try to keep in place. Of course, there's always evenings and times when you're thinking about late at night and weekends, but discipline to the processes for the small business, and not being overwhelmed and overrun by thoughts, and doing it all hours of the day. That I think has been the number one habit that I've been working on.
Do you love talking small business growth with other owners? We have a vibrant online community from many industries around the world. Plus, we regularly add new tools and resources for community members and host 2 webinars a month to help you grow your small business. growsmallbusiness.com.
And can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah. It's always different once you get into the interview process and then the hiring process along the way. And I've had to learn that everyone does things differently and should be allowed to work to their strengths, rather than trying to get someone to fit into the culture of the team necessarily. You need to be allowed to have their own culture that is adding to the business along the way. And so we certainly found that with tour guides. There's a lot of narrative and storytelling with Drink Tasmania. You're out there with guests for 8 hours at a time. There's no way to necessarily teach charm or personal engagement. And you can give them the information, but that information is in some ways dead on the page until they bring it to life.
Yep.
And different personalities will bring that to life in different ways, and that's been really valuable. And I've loved seeing that bring some colour and aspiration, not only for where Drink Tasmania was, but we're now seeing that here with Spirit Thief as well.
What are some things you'd recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Culture is a really important one that I'm focusing on a bit more now, because it's very easy just to get in, do the hours, do the work that's required on a day-to-day basis. But in terms of taking a backward step and thinking about what do we want the culture of this business to look like in 5-10 years' time, comes back to the hiring process, which we're going through now, and also what it is that I want to be proud of in this company in the future there as well. So I don't know the answer to this question yet, but it is one that I'm definitely aware of and am working on regularly.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Balance for me really had to shift in 2016. So my wife was working Monday to Friday in her role, and then I tended to be out in the field as a tour guide 2016 across Saturdays and Sundays and weekends. And when she was pregnant with our first child, we knew that I was going to have to be around a lot more, and I wanted to be able to spend my weekends with the family. And so I had to put in place a lot stronger systems and mechanisms for hiring, reliability, time management, in terms of planning. And that actually meant bringing the business down a little bit. We couldn't sustain the growth and keep going without sacrificing a few things. So sacrifice was something that I learned. Learning how to say no became very important to me as well. And, learning how to say no to private tours and potentially big experiences that might have progressed the company forward even more quickly was something that I'm now comfortable with, but definitely took a little while. And so I'm more comfortable with that now, a few years later with Spirit Thief. Now we've got 2 kids. I've been fortunate enough to, be working 4 days a week. So I've been able to look after them 1 day a week. They're now 2 and 4. So that's been fantastic. And it's brought a lot healthier, happier balance to our whole family.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
A little bit in terms of time more than financial courses.
Yep.
So listening to the podcasts, reading books on business and other areas of interest. But balance, is tricky. I'd say the best investment that I've made on balance was deliberately choosing to have a 4-day working week for the last 3 years, so that I could spend it with my children these early years. So for me, that's an investment in a different kind of way.
Yep. And have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
I have had a couple. With Drink Tasmania, we were able to get a business mentor who was working pro bono. So that was fantastic. I would meet with her every couple of months, probably about every 6 to 8 weeks, around the challenges that the company was having at the time and how we would grow to the next level. I had a 5-year plan as to what we wanted to reach our targets and KPIs on year by year. And she was from a completely different industry, different experience. And what I found so valuable was her capacity to be outside of our industry and to be able to look at the overall vision and structure and be objective to what growth might look like. And, she would highlight things to me that I never would think of, in 100 years. So I found that really valuable. And then it'd be remiss of me to say, mate, that I hadn't experienced mentorship from you as well, because I certainly have in exiting the business, how we'd go about selling and then in setting up our new one with the Distillers Institute. So that's been fantastic, working with you in a mentoring kind of way as well.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and glad I could help where I could. And you have a board of directors at the moment with you and your 3 business partners, the 4 of you on the board?
Yes, that's right. 4 of us on the board. in terms of directors of the business. We also have a tasting panel, given that it's a whiskey company that's Melbourne based, and we've got some industry people who are outside the company that are involved in that as well, and chairing the tasting panel. So one of them, even though he's not a board of director, actually is there in a consulting capacity as well.
How often does the board meet?
We meet every 2 months.
Yep, great. Now, you're one of the few that I've had on that's exited a business. So any pieces of advice you'd give about what you went through selling Drink Tasmania?
Exiting the business, I think, I was told this and I didn't understand it until later on, but it can be a slow and long process. So 12 months, I understand, is probably about average. That's what it took us, depending on the size of the business, of course. But it is also an emotional experience. You don't. I wasn't necessarily just tied to the financial exit. I wanted to see a continued success of this business, going to the new owners and growing it from there. So we had a number of interstate applicants that wanted to move to Tasmania, buy the business and saw it as a lifestyle kind of experience. But it very much factored into our discussions and consideration at the time as to whether they were the right person to sell the business to. And so I didn't really anticipate that would come into it, but it's an emotional investment as well as a financial one.
Yeah. All right, mate, we're on our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Focus, discipline, and cash flow.
Yeah, I totally agree. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Right. Well, I've got 2 here, having thought about this a little bit. So Sell Like Crazy, which is Sabri Subi's marketing business that we both read in the last 12 months, I think just has some absolutely fantastic one-on-one foundational things to think about in terms of marketing and sales. It's free, so if anyone out there wants to pick it up, it's actually a marketing exercise in some ways for King Kong Agency in Melbourne, but you get some brilliant tips on that.
We'll link through to it in the show notes, yeah.
And the other one that I've sort of factored in here is Jack Bogle's book, Enough. So Jack Bogle, who founded Vanguard, sort of shares and investments in the US.
I think it's the biggest fund manager in the world, Vanguard.
It is, yeah. So, whilst it doesn't necessarily relate to my businesses, it's really helped sort of cement the values in why it is that I'm in business in the first place. And so reading Enough, I thought was a fantastic read.
Yep. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Well, look, I've listened to, I think, most of the Grow a Small Business podcast now, Troy, so I do that on a regular basis. And I must say that the industries that I'm least interested in a personal sense, are usually the ones that hold the gems.
Yep.
And things that I never think are going to impact, from whether it be medical or health or insurance side of things. Really fantastic advice in those. So I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yep. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Good bookkeeper and accountant. I wish I'd done that earlier on in Drink Tasmania. It probably took me 12 months to realise I didn't have to manage all the books and accounting myself. And that's absolutely foundational.
Finally, my favourite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
That there's really no end goal to this journey or this experience in the way that I thought there might have been. It seems to be an evolution from one step to the next so far. And when I started out that tourism company, I at the time thought that this would be a career that would carry me through, and so that opportunities arise, and learning how to look for and see those opportunities, and then having the confidence to approach them is a really powerful thing not to be afraid of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Mate, thanks for your time today. I think the audience get a shit ton of value out of your journey and what you shared with us, and congratulations on the success and growth of 2 businesses, and all the best with Spirit Thief into the future. We might have you back on in a year or 2 when you've got a few more bottles out there and a couple more team members.
Yeah, thanks very much, Troy. I've really appreciated the opportunity to be one of your guests.
No worries.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.